Hey everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. So I have a pretty interesting study to share with you and some news about colon cancer. Colon cancer, as you probably know, is a huge issue. It's actually the third leading type of cancer in the United States. And people are starting to develop this horrific disease at an earlier and earlier age as the years go by. And while genetics do play a role in whether or not someone is at risk of developing cancer in general, diet and lifestyle are crucial in either turning on or turning off those genes. So that's known as epigenetics. That's basically, in a nutshell, and a very simplified version of what epigenetics is. It's things that impact your genes that can either trigger or turn off genes that you have naturally from your parents, from their parents, and so on and so forth. You know, these are things that can't change your gene sequencing, of course, but they do alter how your genes are expressed or if they're expressed because of various boring scientific things like methylation and DNA tags and so forth. And one thing that has been a growing concern regarding cancer, and particularly colorectal cancer, is the consumption of red meat. So several years back, the cancer division of the World Health Organization determined that red meat should be listed as a probable carcinogen. That means that it probably causes cancer. Their finding was based on a huge meta-analysis, which means that they looked at hundreds and hundreds of studies, and they determined based on the aggregate of all of that information that yes, red meat probably leads to cancer, and more specifically, colon cancer. Well, they hadn't nailed down and determined why. What the trigger was, what the mechanism was. And now anyone who has read my book knows that I lay out numerous factors, including, sequences of events that occur that cascade in your body when you consume animal protein. And there are various compounds that are released into our systems. I also talk about a substance that's found in meat that our bodies no longer have the ability to process. And my theory, which we did years ago, we did, hundreds of millions of years ago, my theory is that we at one time were meant to consume animal protein, but that we've evolved as a species and now we're not supposed to. Well, scientists may have discovered how specifically red meat leads to colon cancer. So that's what this exciting study is about. The lead author, just so you know who this person is, the name of the doctor heading up the study is Dr. Marios Giannakis, I believe is how you pronounce it, Giannakis. Anyway, Giannakis is an oncologist from Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He's also an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard, so very credentialed. And his team of researchers, what they did is they first pooled data from studies that have tens of thousands of participants. And these people were monitored over the course of decades. So these were long-term studies with a very large number of people who were involved that they followed over the course of those decades. So this is not just like, they did a 2-week study on 10 people and this was their conclusion. So they looked at the 2 studies called the Nurses Health Studies, and then they looked at another study called the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. And over the course of these long-term studies, what happened was almost 5,000 people developed colorectal cancer over the time that they were tracking them. Of those 5,000, they had tumor tissue that they collected. They had samples that they collected from 900 of those 500 people. So Giannakis' team then segmented these samples. They took these samples and they segmented them into different groups based on how much or how little red meat they consumed. Then what they did was they used DNA sequencing and they used tissue samples to try to identify different patterns or commonalities in these samples. What they discovered was that the people who ate the most red meat, they showed evidence of a type of DNA damage that results in mutations that can cause cancer. This particular type of DNA damage is called alkylation. So they also concluded that the study participants with the highest levels of alkylation had an almost 50% greater risk of dying from that disease. So 47%, in fact. If your level of alkylation was highest, you were 47% more likely to die of colorectal cancer than the people in the study with the lowest levels of alkylation. That is unbelievably high. And Giannakis' researchers said that these findings, quote, provide molecular evidence that red meat is likely carcinogenic. And understand, when they say red meat or I say red meat, it's not just beef. A lot of people think, oh, well, I don't eat that much beef, so it's not that big a deal. Red meat, that term actually refers to meat from mammals. So that includes veal, pork, lamb, mutton, goat, horse. And yes, people do eat horse meat. Even here in the United States, horses are slaughtered and they're eaten. And of course, it does mean beef. So very great information. At least now they're figuring out why, how this is. Of course, there are other factors, and I talk about this in my book too, about inflammation and about all different types of things, gut bacteria being disrupted. It has to do a lot with not just the animals themselves and not just the meat themselves, but also what they're putting into the animals, what they're injecting into them, what they're feeding them. I mean, it's a confluence of factors that leads to a lot of disease. So I hope you guys will share this information with other people. And I appreciate you guys watching and listening. Thank you so much. Take care, and I will talk with you soon.